I have given thousands of lessons for more than 30 years. I'm about to show you what I've learned in those 30 years of teaching. It'll go completely through your bag from driver to irons to wedges to putter. It's pretty simple, pretty concise, but I think the tips you'll see in this video will greatly improve your golf game. So the first thing that I've learned about learning to hit driver correctly and be a great driver of the golf ball will probably bore you because it's about setup. And it's really about having the ball in the same place every time. If you can get it in the same place every time, then you can develop a swing for that ball position that produces good results. Most players these days swing a driver at least 90 miles an hour, and at that club head speed, just being off an inch or two one direction or another is dramatic in terms of how offline you'll hit a ball. And then people blame their swings or their hips or looking up or whatever, and it's really, they just haven't paid enough attention to ball position. So if nothing else, pay attention. If you go to watch tour players at a tour event, almost all of them use alignment sticks, the best players in the world, every day that they practice. And they set up a tee like this, and they're trying to see where their ball position should be, and then they're trying to see where their feet, hips, and shoulders are parallel to their target line, parallel left to their target line. So it's that simple. One of the biggest things I work with most people is they get the ball too far forward in their stance, and then when they reach with their hands to get to the ball, it makes their shoulders go to the left, and so they're doomed to either hit pop-ups, duck hooks, or big slices. And so pay attention, please, to how you set up, and you'll become a much better driver of the golf ball if you'll do that. And so I like just to set up a really easy tee thing. The other thing I would add to that is I would add a cardboard box. And when I go to the range and hit drivers, I would just tee this ball up where my ball position stick's pointing right at it, and I have this driver in this box, and I just give myself barely enough room to swing and not hit it. That'll help you work on alignment, that'll help you work on ball position, and I've hit thousands of balls in my early career when I was trying to become a good player with driver with this box. And it's nothing new. Sam Snead used to tell all the rookies on tour to get a 2x4 and put it there and learn to hit the ball, not the 2x4, if you wanted to be a good player. So it's nothing new, but it's really effective, and if you haven't done it, I recommend it highly. One of the things that's really changed with drivers, with the technology today, the new driver is amazing in terms of how far it goes. And one of the biggest changes when I was learning to play and growing up in the late 70s and early 80s, still playing with persimmon-headed drivers, wooden clubs, if you didn't hit a draw with it, you really couldn't play, because anything that put slice spin on or fade spin on would also put way too much backspin. And so the best players generally hit draws, some of them really big hooks, and just played it because it didn't spin very much, and they could still hit it a pretty long ways with a draw, but it went nowhere if you hit a fade or a slice. And so what's really changed with the modern club, I find so many people that come to me for lessons are still wanting to hit draws with everything, but most of the tour players nowadays hit fades with their driver because the modern club, they've got the spin rates down so low that you can hit fades now that will still go just as far as a draw, and it's much more easy to control and hit in the fairway. So a lot of players are hitting fades now, and these clubs are kind of fade biased, a lot of them, and they for sure are such low spinning club heads now. They figured out how to get low backspins, and fades will go just as far. And so understand that, and maybe not be so worried about whether your shot's left or right, because left or right's probably still pretty good with these modern drivers, where it would have been a disaster 30 years ago. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I've learned with driver, and especially with really good accomplished players, but I think it applies to everybody, is I don't like to tee the ball up too high. It should be teed higher than what a 3-wood would be teed because the head's so big, but I'm trying to hit the ball right here where my thumbnail's at. And you can see that this bottom part of the club's still there, so that would be the tee, but that's all the higher it needs to be off the grass, is maybe an inch, maybe an inch and a half. And then I still like to feel like, even with driver, that I'm just barely brushing the grass down here at the bottom of my swing. If I was a long drive contestant, I would tee the ball as high as they would let me tee it. There's no doubt that if you catch it perfect, you can hit it farther if it's teed up really high. However, the long drive people only have to hit 1 out of 8 shots in a 40-yard grid. And so it's worth it to them to tee it up really high and try to maximize their distance. But you don't see many of the tour players with a high tee. You'll see a few, but you won't see many. Most of them are trying to bottom out right at the ball. That's how you hit fades. If you want to hit a hook, you bottom out 4 or 5 inches behind the ball and hit it on the upswing. But most of them don't want to hook it anymore. But for you average players, recreational players, if you practice with driver a lot off a tall tee and then come complain to me because you can't hit fairway woods off the ground, I mean, it's not even worth listening to. That's probably what your reasoning is behind that. You're so much upswing with driver because it's teed so high that when you try to hit a 3-wood or a 5-wood off a tight lie, you're still on the upswing too much and you literally can't make contact. You're going to top it. And so I think in order for you to be consistent where your club head is bottoming out, I don't think driver should be teed too high, and I would still try to brush the grass with driver just barely as I'm swinging and let the ball get in the way. And if you learn that angle of attack with driver, you'll have more success with all the other clubs in your bag off the fairway, if I'm just trying to brush the grass with all of them. So please keep that in mind. Tee height's important. For those of you that's got kids and grandkids that are learning how to play, I mean, I see them with 4 and 5 inch tees, and a lot of them can hit driver great, but they can't hit any other club in their bag very well. Don't let your kids tee it up that high. The junior drivers aren't near as big a headed as these anyway. No more than 2 inches is what I would tell you to have the tee height for your junior player. So tee height's very important. Ball position, tee height. Ball position's not a fundamental, by the way. There's many great players that play driver off their left foot or off their left shoulder, and they're great players. But there are other great drivers of the ball that almost play everything in the middle. And it kind of depends on your swing. If I am a rotary player with very little lateral motion, I'm going to bottom out here in front of my chest. And so those players kind of play every ball position in the same. The more lateral motion I have on the way down, the more the ball needs to be forward. But there's only one way to find out what's the best place for you, and that's literally to experiment with ball position. If I turn with this box this way, you can see this would be off my left shoulder or my heel. I can hit balls and see how well I hit it. I may be better off there. If I tend to hit hooks, I'm be better off playing it farther back a lot of times. And if I'm hitting slices, I'm better off playing it more forward, likely a lot. And so experiment with that. And it might even be the opposite. There's a lot of players, the farther it gets back, more in the middle of their stance, they actually hit more hooks from that position because their path comes from the inside then. And so really keep that in mind, how important distance away from the ball is in ball position. The other thing I would tell you is distance away from the ball, as I've said in many of my videos, is my most important fundamental. But that changes to each player as well, so there's guidelines. But the steeper a player swings, the closer to their feet the club head swings, and the flatter they are in their swing, the farther away from them a club head will swing. So you got to kind of figure out what your issue is and where the ball should be for you. I find in my instruction with the players that I see on a day-to-day basis that most people are too close to the ball. However, they get close to the ball, but then they have really steep downswings, which makes them swing close to their feet. And if I simply tell them to get farther away, they'll hit everything off the tip end of the club because they don't change the path of their swing. And so keep that in mind. But I find being too close to the ball is the biggest mistake, because I either get jammed on the way down where I don't have room to swing, and so the club will stay behind me and I'll slice everything, or I come over the top and I get the club out in front of my hands and now I hit low duck hooks. So if you're a player that has a two-way miss for right-handed, low left and high right, chances are you're not far enough away from the ball. So keep that in mind on the things that I've learned over the years of what the best drivers do. The next part that I've learned is that most of the players that I see that slice, especially block it, maybe it doesn't slice much, but just goes straight right, they hit it pretty solid. But then it can also slice as well from there. Don't release the club early enough on the downswing. And this is a tricky subject, but what I found is this. From what I understand, once a player gets to the top of their backswing, it only takes 7/10 of a second to get to impact. So less than a second. Not very much time to think, not very much time to do anything. And so what I find, most people are trying to rotate their arms and finish over here, but most people do it after the ball's already gone. And so if that's you, you'll hit a lot of tops, you'll hit a lot of shots straight right, and you'll hit a lot of slices. And so what I found is, which helps even really accomplished players that are hitting blocks to the right, I try to tell them that when their lead arm gets about parallel here on the way down to the ball, that I want to feel this rotation to start that early with driver. Driver's the longest shaft in our bag. I have to start earlier to get this length of a club back to square. So I want to see people releasing and feeling this. Now, I don't want them unhinging their hands. I want them pronating this left arm. So if I got my thumb up, I'm going to have my thumb sideways or knuckles down by the time I'm here. That's what it will feel like. So it looks like this when I do it, okay? But when I turn my hips and my shoulders and I do that at the same time, it doesn't exaggerate that as much as you would think it would. Is it possible to do that too early? It is, but you'll know it. You'll either top it and it'll bounce to the left probably, or you'll hook it. But for some of you that never hooked it before ever in your life, try it. Get to where you can hook it. If you want to quit being a slicer, learn how to hit hooks and you'll fix your slice. That's the other thing I've learned. And so it's important for a right-handed player to do it with this lead arm, this left arm. When I do it with my left arm, my shoulders stay back. I don't use them. If I try to do it with my right, my shoulders are always going to open up at the same time. So that's where I think most people struggle. They try to release it with their right hand because they're right hand dominant, and then they get in this position on the way down where the club's out here, their shoulders are way left. Now the only thing they can do is drop the club on the ball and it's either going to pop up or go right. And so if I learn to do it with my left, then I can keep my shoulders back. That's going to deliver the club more on an inside path and you'll be much more successful. So try that if you haven't tried it, even in the backyard. Making this move here on the way down will be great for all of you. Two more things of what I've learned with driver. One, the most important thing is to hit it solid in the middle of the club face. Number two is to always give yourself as much room as possible if there's out of bounds on one side of the hole or water on one side of the hole. The best drivers avoid penalty shots. And so it's pretty important to play away from the penalty areas if possible. You're much better off in a fairway bunker on the right or in the rough on the right than out of bounds on the left. And so don't be scared of the routine trouble on the opposite side of the out of bounds or the hazards, the penalty areas. So keep that in mind as well. The other thing that I've learned too that helps most people is you have to learn to make a swinging motion. And it's very easy the way we're built if we hold the club parallel to the ground. I like making a lot of baseball level swings with driver where I can feel this club swing around me in a circle in a swinging motion. And the better you get at making a swinging motion, the better a driver you'll be. And then really all that happens is we take this angle that's level to the ground and we tilt it to the ball, and then we still swing on that same circle the shaft's on, but it's on a tilted circle. So keep that in mind. I do that drill a lot. I do it with the orange whip. Orange whip is a great training aid to feel that motion. It's so heavy that it almost just swings me as I get it going. Then I can lower it down to the ground, feel like I'm on that same angle on my backswing and follow through. Backswing and follow through with driver are equally important. That's another thing that I've learned. So keep that in mind as you're practicing and playing. The other thing I would tell you is this: on that same mode, when I'm parallel to the ground here, if I just go forward, you'll see that club's right there. If I turn around and face this way, if I just go forward, you'll see that club's parallel to the ground. It's right there. Well, even though the ball's on the ground and I'm tilted, after impact, that's where my driver's gotta be, is in that same place that I was in when I was practicing level to the ground. Same thing backswing. Halfway back, I'm just like this. If I tilt, you'll see the face tilts. That's my backswing position with driver. So that baseball swing or level swing around can help you feel those correct positions. And that's my final thing on follow through then. I like players to feel like after impact, this club head's on their heel line, the shaft's parallel to the ground, and they're letting the ball get in the way from there. And if you've always been a slicer, if you'll try this on the follow through, if you'll try releasing this club earlier on the way down, on the downswing, it'll fix your slices, I promise. The most important statistic if you want to improve your scores is greens in regulation. You know, if you're a player that's trying to be a single-digit handicap and you're not averaging somewhere between 10 and 12 greens in regulation, you'll never get to be a single-digit handicap. And so I think it's the most telling statistic. But frankly, it involves other statistics. If you can't hit driver in the fairway and you're always chipping out of the woods or taking a penalty drop out of a penalty area, you're not going to be able to hit a green in regulation. But for most of you, I find a lot of guys hit driver reasonably well enough, but their approach shots just aren't on the green. That's simple. There's a lot of reasons for that. One, I think people don't know their yardages and they never know exactly how far they hit every club. They know one day, one time they hit a 7-iron 150 and they think that's how far 7-iron's going to go every time they use it. But in reality, it only goes 135 most of the time and they're in the front bunker. So if you don't know how far you hit your irons, I recommend finding somebody with a TrackMan and going and taking a lesson from them and say, hey, for an hour, I want to hit every club in my bag and see what my carry distances are. Total doesn't mean anything. Carry distance is everything. And so there's a lot of people that hit 7-iron 150 yards total, but they hit it on such a low trajectory that it only flies 135. And they shoot a front pin with the rangefinder and it says 150, but it's 5 steps on the front of the green, and they hit 7-iron and they're in the creek in front of the green. And they think they hit a great shot. So learn to understand what your carry distances are. Weather affects that. You're not going to hit it as far when it's 40 or 50 degrees Fahrenheit as you're going to hit it when it's 90. Man, our heat index today is 105. The ball goes forever. And but boy, if you're playing in April and it's 43 degrees one day, it's not going to go as far. So learn your carry distances. Learn how much wind affects your ball too. That being said, I find that what helps most people with their irons is to try to play from a pretty consistent ball position regardless of the iron. When I'm chipping or pitching, I can obviously vary that. If I have an uneven lie, I'm obviously going to vary that. But as a general rule of thumb, I like the ball to be just forward of the center of our stance if we have a good lie. And the reason I think that's important with every club is because if my ball position is correct, my takeaway is going to be the same with every club and have a good chance to be on plane. I find a lot of people put the ball back with their hands forward with irons, but then that gets their takeaways too far to the inside, and they either continue that way and block it, or then they've got to reroute it over the top on the way down. So impact and setup are different. Do the best players have forward shaft lean at impact? They do, but most of the best players start with the club in this position, in my opinion. So I'm a fan of that. You have to have a flat lie, you have to have a really good lie. If the ball's down, sitting down in a divot, I'm obviously going to have to play it farther back in my stance. But for good lies, I like it just forward to center with everything. And I think it'll help. The other thing to keep in mind with irons, just like I've shown before with driver and irons, is The shaft angles aren't the same. I'm going to be different distances away from every iron because the shaft's either a little bit longer or the lie's a little bit flatter. And so it's very important that you get the correct distance away. And we always want to be the same distance away from this end of the club to my belt buckle. And a pretty good rule of thumb is if I spread out my thumb and little fingers, the distance between the end of this and my belt buckle is a pretty good judge for distance away. You can also set up and measure where it hits you just above the knee is another pretty good measurement. But I promise you, if you'll get set up the correct distance away from each club, have the ball positioned consistently in the same place every time, you'll get a lot more consistent. And then it's just a matter of practicing, learning what your carry distances really are, and you'll be a lot better off. Pitch shots. Kind of depends on what part of the country you're in, but most of you, if you learn to use your most lofted club, in the long run you'll be a lot better. A lot of people are scared of using a 60-degree club because they just don't set up to it correctly and use it correctly. And what I've learned is there's two distinct methods of learning to chip and pitch. And I find that some people are better at one than the other. But I also find that the better a player you are and the better a player you want to become, you probably need to learn both because both of them have their circumstances. The one we did just a video on chipping and pitching a couple weeks ago that was the Scotty Scheffler method with the lofted club 60 degrees where the ball's played back in your stance with your hands forward and there's no wrist action in this. It's just all arms and shoulders and hip turn, and the ball's on a flat lie would bottom out pretty far back in my stance. It's a pretty popular method here in the Midwest for most players to learn to use off of zoysia and stuff. I recommend learning to use it. It's great for chipping around the green on short shots, but if you learn to use your lofted wedges, it's really good at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50-yard shots. And so I recommend practicing that one and learning it. Ball position and setup looks like this. By the way, I didn't mention, but feet, hips, shoulders, if my club face is square, my stance is square. I don't open up. If I open the face to have to hit it really high, then I open my stance. But as long as the club face is square, I try to be square with my shoulders and my feet. So set up this way, gonna maintain that angle. Pretty abbreviated follow through because I'm not unhinging my hands. And I'm going to hit that shot and keep this club out in front of me on the finish. The other one, especially for you guys that hit a lot of fat shots, hit behind the ball, is actually where the club is in the middle of our body at address. The handle points at my belt buckle. The leading edge is perfectly straight down behind me. And this one is going to be some wrist hinge. Back I'm going to hinge, and on my first move down, I'm just going to re-hinge. On little short shots, that might be all the follow-through that I have. A little bit longer shot, a little bit longer shot. My follow-through will dictate that. Very good on tight lies. It uses the bounce of the club quite effectively. Really hard to hit chunks unless you're lowering your head up and down too much. And it's really good out of the rough when you have 2, 3, 4 inches of heavy rough. It's probably the best pitching technique out of the rough, and it's a very good way to hit bunker shots. So that last method is pretty good in a lot of cases. Like I said, I like to use both. This leading edge, this here is right at my belt buckle. The club's as tall as it can be. And so I'm going to hinge, unhinge, and let it follow through as I go through. So that hits a nice high soft shot. It's just a matter of learning how hard to swing. Neither one of those takes much of a divot. That's one of the fascinating things by watching tour players practice. You can't hardly tell. They could hit a whole bucket of balls with these chip shots and you wouldn't even have been able to tell they're there. And so all they're doing is brushing the grass. So man, you guys that are gouging and sticking the club in the ground, you're not doing things right. So pay attention to setup. You can't blend the methods. You cannot set up with the ball back in your stance and then hinge and unhinge, or you're just going to slam the club in the ground. So both methods are different. That's what I find most people that have pitching and chipping problems, they're setting up like this and then hinging and unhinging and wonder why they hit everything fat. Or they're set up like this and there's no hinge at all and they wonder why they're blading them over the greens. And so you can't blend the two methods. My shoulders when the ball's back are much more level, or maybe even left shoulder down. And then when my ball's more here in the middle, my shoulders are on a completely different angle. And so if I play the ball back and tilt like this, it's another pretty good reason why you're sticking the club in the ground. So pay attention to all of that. That's what I've learned, is that you need two methods to chip and pitch. I prefer you to use your most lofted club most of the time, and I recommend you experiment with other methods. We've shown using a hybrid. We've shown different ways to chip out of different lies, but most of the time, if you'll master these two shots with your most lofted club, in the long run you'll be better off. And then to practice, what I found is you have to play by yardages when you're pitching. You have to learn what it feels like to fly at 10 yards, what it feels like 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards. Everybody out there watching knows how far they hit their pitching wedge. These days at my age, I hit my pitching wedge 105 yards. If I have to go 112, I use my 9-iron. I don't swing harder with my pitching wedge. That's just common sense. But when we have these shorter yardages, we have to learn the feel of the club head speed to hit at different distances. Some coaches recommend the clock method of where you stop on your backswing dictates how far the ball goes, but that only works if those stopping points change your club head speed. And what I find with most players is it doesn't. And so I hate that clock method. If I'm throwing a ball, I don't think about where my arm stops on my backswing. But if I have to throw it a long ways, I'm going to really wind up. And if I'm throwing it a short ways, I'm not going to take much of a backswing. I just instinctively know that. And you should learn that too. So it's all club speed that's going to dictate, as long as I'm making center contact, that's going to dictate how far the ball goes. It's not an 8 o'clock versus a 9 o'clock versus a 10 o'clock. I think the people that do that play good in spite of doing that, not because of it. I'm sure that'll be controversial, but tough. I know I'm right. So, for me, if I set up with that second one with the ball just in the middle, and I just want to go 10 yards in the air, I know how hard to swing to hit at 10 yards, okay? That's pretty good, huh, Patrick? First shot of the day? Yep. And it's the same thing. So I would practice over and over and over hitting at 10 yards. If it went 12, I'd say that one was 12. I swung too hard. If it goes 8, that was 8. Wasn't hard enough. And I would practice till I really could feel 10 yards. And then I would go to 20. The next flag out there is 20. And so I just need to swing a little harder to make it go 20, but as I'm taking a practice swing, I can feel that club head speed, just what I've learned over the years in order to learn to hit at 20. And you can see I'm pretty dang good at it. And I'm pretty dang good at it because I've been doing this for 30 years. And this is how I've practiced. And I've got one of the best short games around, because I can control my yardages. And I can do it with this method where I'm hinging and unhinging, and I can do it with this method where all I'm doing is maintaining my angle and turning and learning how fast to do it. One produces a high shot, one other one produces a lower trajectory shot that spins a lot. So practice to your yardages. Learn to walk up on the green and say, I need to land it here. I walk back to my ball and it's 10 yards. Man, I know how to hit that shot. And it'll really improve your short game. You'll get it up and down much more often. Here's what I've learned about putting over 30 years of teaching it. There's just 3 skills that you need to learn. You need to learn to be able to hit it straight and to aim correctly. And then you need to learn to control your distance. And then you need to learn how to read greens. And if you really work on your setup, that'll really help too. So this video will help you with all those aspects. If I had one drill to do that I would recommend everybody do, would be to putt on a straight line. Find a straight putt, either snap a carpenter's chalk line on the green, or get this training aid here, which is just 2 little pencil-like stakes and a string. Line it up straight. You'll be able to see if your putter is set up square at address. You'll be able to see if your eyes are over the target line, because if they are, this yellow string, I can't see the white line on my putter. So all I've got to do then is get set up, and I can learn to roll that putt up and down on this line. I have to get to the point where from 3 or 4 feet away from the hole, I don't miss with this line. Will that mean I won't miss on the golf course? Not necessarily, because as break gets involved, it becomes tougher. But boy, if I can get to the point where I can roll it in the hole every single time on this chalk line, you'll gain the confidence that you need to play good on the golf course. What else I've learned in 30 years of teaching people how to putt better is the easiest way to work on path that I've found is to use a training aid called the putting arc. I've shown it in several other videos that we've done. You've probably seen my old wooden one. This is the new one. The putter swings on an arc because the shaft has to have at least a 10-degree lie angle off of 90 degrees. And so our path would be straight back and straight through if our shaft was on a 90-degree angle to the ground. It's one of the reasons why Steve Stricker putts with the heel off the ground. It gets his shaft steeper. And so, but because the rules require that we have a shaft angle, we need to, our putter needs to swing on an arc. If I was on a 90-degree angle and parallel to the ground here, you can see as I turn back and turn through that that's quite an arc with the head of the club. Well, as this tilts down and I still have an arc, that's still going to swing. I'm exaggerating it, but there's going to be a swing back and forth. And so this putting arc is designed for that angle. And you can practice putting to a hole, but I'm not here. I just like, man, you can keep it in the living room at home, and you can just go back and forth on this arc until you can feel what a correct path feels like. I promise you, once you feel that, you'll like it. On very short putts, you can barely detect there's any arc at all. And that's why a lot of people think that the best players are going straight back and straight through. They're putting on very fast greens, so they're not taking the putter very far back in their backswing and follow through on a lot of putts. And it looks like it's going straight back, but there's a slight arc. And if you'll understand that, it'll improve your putting. Okay, so here's what I've really learned in 30 years of working with people to improve their putting. And it's how important it is to set up perfectly. I think it's more important to set up perfectly with your putting than it is your full swing. And most of you really know how much importance I place on setup and full swing. But putting's even more important. Here's why. Most putting strokes, the putter is not going to move more than a foot or two in any direction. A lot less in most cases on a short putt. And if I am misaligned with my feet, hips, shoulders, forearms, eye line position, I don't have time to compensate for a mistake. In my full swing, I've seen players that aim too far right or too far left or have poor ball position, but their swing is long enough and takes enough time that they can come over the top just enough to hit it or go under the bottom just enough to hit it. And so we've actually got some margin for error in a full swing. But we have zero margin of error in a putting stroke, and not enough people pay attention to getting precisely set up. That's why if you watch on live from the Olympics this week or live from the Masters next year, when they show the guys putting on the putting green, almost all of them daily will set up in a mirror to make sure of their posture, alignment, eye line position, whether the putter's square or not. And so these putting mirrors are great. I like to find a short putt that's straight in. I can line this main line up straight in the hole. I can get my putter square to that line. When my eyes are over my target line, which I like the best, I can see my face in the mirror, and I know that that's where I'm at. And then I can tell with my shoulder line that I'm parallel to my target line. My path is going to be dictated by how my shoulders are at address and how my forearms are at address. So I'm going to set up here and have Patrick come in, and he can just put that across my forearms just above my wrist like that. And so I can see in that mirror that I'm square with my forearms. I see a lot of people this way with their forearms, and they wonder why they pull putts. That makes their path go that way. If my arms are this way, my path's going to go that way. And I won't have time to compensate for it with anything but my wrist. And so that's why people get the yips, is they're not set up correctly. And now they have to manipulate it with their hands, and they get nervous, and their hands know it, and they have big issues. So if you will simply get you a putting mirror, I like them from Eyeline Golf, set up square, get your forearms square, and from there then we can roll putts. Again, good and square, good and up there. I'm going to hit it. And we're going to practice on this mirror until we can make most of our putts. But if you will get lined up correctly, I promise it'll improve your putts. I mean, I see people like this, and their putter like this, and I mean, and they think they're good putters, and they're not. And so if you want to putt like a tour player, you got to set up like a tour player. Feet, hips, shoulders parallel to our target line, forearms square. How you hold the putter dictates that. If the people that are using their normal golf grip, get behind me there again with the stick, Patrick. Here I go. If I do my normal golf grip, my forearms point to the left. And my putting stroke's going to be outside in, and I'm going to leave the face open and cut across the ball. And that's probably 80% of the people I work with, that's their mistake.
Oh, I see it all the time too, absolutely.
And it's all from a poor setup and a poor grip. For people that are really this way, go ahead and put that on my forearms again, Patrick. For people that are really this way, if you go left hand low, do you see how that automatically changes that forearm position? So I'm an advocate of left hand low for right-hander grips, putting for people that have open forearms. But I see other people that don't have open forearms, and they get left hand low, and now do you see where that goes? Well, now my putting stroke's going to go that way, and I'm going to have to close the face to get it on line. And in a very short motion, I don't have time to compensate for that. And so that's why, especially you competitive players that are watching, if you're not really particular about how you set up, it's important. The other thing I'll mention lastly is that once I get set up here, my forearms in the shaft ought to line up on the same plane. So I don't want to see an angle, my shaft like this and my forearms like this, or I don't want to be like this, where I want the shaft and my forearms to line up the same way, on the same angle. And then if I practice on the putting arc like that, I will have a perfect path, and then I'll be able to control the face as well. So any questions on that, just leave some comments. But I think that'll really help your putting.
Absolutely.
So what else I've learned about putting in 30 years of instruction is the most important skill really to learn in putting is controlling the speed of your putt. Distance control is everything. Reading greens is important, but if you don't know how hard you're going to hit the ball, a single putt that might break a foot from 10 feet actually might have 5 or 6 different breaks depending on how hard you hit the ball. So it's very important to understand how important it is to really get good at distance control. In my very first video that Patrick and I did together, it was a short game clinic. I recommend you watch it. We were pretty new at videoing then, so there was a lot of it that wasn't as good as some of our latest videos production-wise, but it's still a very popular video, and there's a lot of good information in there. But some of the comments that I got from that video, one of the most important things I said in there was that everybody understands, or most people understand, what smash factor means on TrackMan with a driver. If you go get fit for a driver somewhere that uses TrackMan technology to help fit you, they try to fit you into a driver where your smash factor gets as close as possible to 1.5. And all smash factor is ball speed divided by club head speed. So if I had 150 mile an hour ball speed and 100 mile an hour club head speed, my smash factor would be 1.5, which is supposed to be the maximum allowed for a driver. Well, what most people think is driver has the highest smash factor. A lob wedge, for instance, the smash factor is only going to be about 1.0. Your ball speed and club speed are the same. But actually, putter for most people has the highest smash factor. It's 1.87 on most putters with 4 degrees aloft. And that means that the ball goes 1.87 times faster than the club speed. So people, especially beginners, when they first start putting, they always hit the putt too hard because they see how far away they are. They have a sense if they were going to throw a ball, how far that ball would roll, and so they hit the putt like that, but it goes 1.87 times faster, and so they blow it way by. And after you blow it way by a bunch, you realize how bad that is. Then the rest of your life, you're always too scared to hit it hard enough, and almost everybody ends up short because they're scared. And so you have to learn the bounce factor. I don't believe that there's a correlation between how far back you go and how far you follow through to determine speed. There's not a direct correlation in my opinion. I don't have to swing very much faster to hit a 10-foot putt farther than a 5-foot putt. I don't go twice as far back. And so, but you have to learn the bounce factor. And the best way that I've found for people to practice is to practice putting looking at the hole. And so I have a downhill putt, breaks right to left. Once I get set up here, I'm going to aim to the right of the hole a couple feet. And so I'm looking the distance of the hole, but a couple feet to the right because this breaks. And then by looking at that while I'm hitting my putt, I have to feel with my eyes how hard to roll this ball. And it takes a lot of practice. But man, if for an hour a week or a half hour a day, if you're playing every day, if you'll practice putting, looking at the hole from different distances, I promise you'll improve. So it'll look something like this. I haven't hit one putt yet today. I'm usually pretty good at rolling at the right speed from this. And that's what I would like, to get it to the hole and have a chance to go in. And I'm just going to roll it down there. So I'm just going to putt, looking at the hole, not taking very much time. And I'm adjusting as I'm practicing. If I hit it too hard on one of them, I'll swing a little earlier to where I can feel how hard it is I need to roll that ball. This was way downhill. If I went back up the hill, I'd have to hit it a lot harder. But my eyes should eventually be able to tell me, you know, am I uphill or downhill, and it'll make that adjustment. What you'll then find, for those of you that watch golf on television, you'll be able to tell every tour player that practices putting looking at the hole, because they'll use their line on their ball to pick their target line. And then once they come over here, they will take their practice strokes looking at the hole, and they're pretending to hit it. And then once they set up here, they get lined up, and then they just trust exactly how hard that was to roll that ball with their eyes. And that's all part of their routine. And so that's the best routine, in my opinion, to have as a player on the putting green. And the only way you'll learn to do it is by practicing putting looking at the hole. And I'm just going to talk about green reading really quickly. We've discussed it in a couple other videos. But it's important that you really understand the difference in uphill and downhill and how that dramatically affects the speed. The faster a putt is, the more it breaks, because the putt doesn't really start to break until it slows down considerably. So uphill putts, especially very short uphill putts, you don't have to play very much break, because you have to hit those putts so firmly that they don't slow down enough to break. But if you had the subsequent downhill putt from the opposite direction and it was very fast, well, you might have to play it outside the hole because you're not hitting the ball very hard. So understand how hard the ball is rolling determines when it breaks. That's why some players are better on Bermuda and some players are better on bent grass. It's because the apex of those putts are different. The grass type, Bermuda breaks a lot later in the putt, and bent grass has a more gradual break the whole time. And so you find players that grow up down south on Bermuda generally play better on those type surfaces, and guys that grow up north of the Mason-Dixon line on bent grass usually putt better on bent grass. The other thing to keep in mind is you have to be really observant. You should watch every chip and every putt roll out till it stops after you hit it, because those last 3 or 4 feet that it travels, it will show you the break. So if you knock a putt 10 feet by and you see that it breaks to the left past the hole, well, you know it's going to break a little bit to the right coming back. So I don't think enough people watch the ball. I don't think enough people watch the balls of their playing companions and see what their balls are doing. So you have to be very observant. There's some other things that I'm not going to go into, but the aim point method of reading greens I think is great. So if you're interested in that, just check them out online, Aim Point, and they'll show you how to use Aim Point. Most of the tour players are using it. When you see them behind the ball and they're holding up fingers, that's what they're using as aim point. I'm a plumb bobber from years back. We'll probably have to do a video just on plumb bobbing someday. It really works. Maybe that's a way that you learn to read greens better. There's also an app that I've mentioned before called Tour Read. And if you have an iPhone, it has a gyroscope in it. And if you can put your phone on the ground, it actually measures the slope, and it will tell you exactly how much a 10 or 12 or 20-foot putt breaks. And you can imagine, you can set that down, use it, see if you see the same thing. If you don't, you can hit putts until you can see why the putt's doing what it's doing. But putts always go downhill, and so that's just a fact of physics. People will complain they miss a putt sometimes because it goes uphill. It never goes uphill unless it is deflected by something, but it always goes downhill. So you just didn't know where downhill is when you miss it. So keep that in mind. But green reading is very important. In other videos I've talked about looking at the grain of the green. The darker the grass looks is uphill, and the shinier the grass looks is downhill. And that's another really good way to learn to do it. But learn to read greens, get your local pro to help you with that. Mainly it's experience, hitting balls, watching them curve, trying to figure out what made them curve. My other point too, on pretty long putts, I find that most people underread greens by about 50%. So double what you see and you'll probably putt better on longer putts. So we talked about dark and shiny. I call it dull and shiny. If you look from where the camera is here, you can see that the color of the grass is dark. That means it's uphill. And once I get about right here, it changes color. And you'll see that it's a lot lighter color. I call it shinier. And that means once it reaches this point of the green, it's going downhill. If Patrick turns around the other way, I can see it good. I hope the camera can. You can see all through here now it's light color, and then right about here it's going to get dark again, and that means it's uphill. And so that's just the opposite. It should be the opposite of what it looked like from this view. And if you'll learn to start looking for that, it'll really help your green reading and understand where uphill and downhill is. This is bent grass green, so even on bent grass you can see this color change. On Bermuda you can really see it. So if you're down south you should be really noticing that. And if you look for it on television, you can really see it on television, the change in colors.